Beside the bed in a grand American mansion, there was often a small object that looked harmless, a bell pull. For the person lying under clean sheets in a warm room, it meant comfort. If they wanted more water, a brighter fire, another blanket, or help getting dressed, they could pull the bell and wait. But somewhere else in the house, that same bell meant something very different. It meant someone had to get up. Someone had to leave a small room, step into a dark hallway, find the back stairs, and answer the call. The bell tells us the truth about these houses. The mansion was not only built for the rich people who owned it, it was also built around the workers who had to keep it running. From the front, these homes looked calm and beautiful. A visitor saw the marble hall, the grand staircase, the dining room, the library, the drawing room, the bedrooms, and the wide lawn outside. Everything seemed peaceful. Everything seemed easy. But that was the trick. A mansion only looked effortless because other people were working behind the walls, under the floors, above the ceilings, and behind the doors guests were not supposed to open. The family lived in the visible house. The servants lived in the hidden house. To understand where servants slept, imagine walking through a mansion late at night. Dinner is over. The guests have gone upstairs. The dining room has been cleared. The candles are low. The main staircase is empty. Then a bell rings from one of the bedrooms. The guest may only want something small, but the whole hidden side of the house wakes up. A servant sees which room has called, leaves their own room, and moves through the service route. Not the grand staircase, not the beautiful hallway. They use the narrow stairs, the back corridor, the side door, the passage near the pantry, or the stair tucked behind a wall. The guest sees the servant appear, but they do not see the journey it took to get there. That journey is the real story of the mansion. Servants did not usually sleep where the house was most beautiful. They slept where the house needed them to be useful. A maid might sleep on the third floor or attic because she had to be close to the bedrooms. A male servant might sleep near the basement or service hall because he had to be close to the doors, pantry, wine, coal, or dining room. A coachman might sleep near the carriage house. A gardener might sleep in a cottage on the estate. A laundress might sleep near the laundry building. The sleeping place was not random. It showed what kind of work that person did and how quickly the family expected them to respond. The easiest way to picture it is this. The mansion had two maps. One map belonged to the family and guests. It showed the front door, the grand stairs, the drawing room, the dining room, the library, the bedrooms, the porch, the garden, and the view. The other map belonged to the workers. It showed the kitchen, the scullery, the pantry, the linen closet, the servants' hall, the laundry, the coal room, the back stairs, the attic rooms, the basement corridors, and the doors that looked almost invisible. Both maps were inside the same house, but they did not lead to the same life. This is why servant staircases are so important. A servant staircase was not just a smaller staircase, it was a separate path through the house. It let workers move quickly without crossing the grand rooms too often. It connected the parts of the mansion that guests were not supposed to think about. A servant could go from the kitchen to the bedroom floor, from the laundry to the linen closet, from the attic rooms to the pantry, without using the same route as the family. The staircase made labor move quietly. It helped the rich household feel smooth, calm, and almost magical. But nothing about it was magic. Every clean room had been cleaned by someone. Every warm bedroom had been heated by someone. Every polished fork had been polished by someone. Every bed had been made by someone. Every meal had passed through someone's hands before it appeared in the dining room. The great trick of the mansion was that it hid the work so well that the visitor could forget the workers were there. In many Gilded Age mansions, female servants often slept high in the house. These were not the grand bedrooms shown to guests. They were plain rooms on upper floors, sometimes near the roof, sometimes at the end of a service hallway. A maid's room might have a narrow bed, a washstand, a chair, a trunk, and very little space. Downstairs, the family bedroom might have soft curtains, a fireplace, carved furniture, and a view over the grounds. Upstairs, under the same roof, the servants' room was small and simple. The same house held both comfort and exhaustion. The reason was practical but also unfair. The maids had to be near the rooms they served. Before the family woke up, they might already be working. Fires had to be prepared, ashes had to be removed, curtains had to be opened, beds had to be made, water had to be carried, towels had to be placed, dust had to disappear. The bedroom had to look as if no one had worked in it at all. That was the skill of service in a mansion, making hard work invisible. Think of a guest bedroom in the morning. The person sleeping there opens their eyes and sees sunlight on the curtains, a quiet fireplace, fresh water, and clean linen. Maybe they believe the house is simply well managed. But hours earlier, someone had climbed stairs with tired legs. Someone had carried water. Someone had bent over the hearth. Someone had shaken out fabric, wiped surfaces, and made sure everything looked calm before the guest woke. The guest saw the final picture. The servant lived through the work behind it. The maid's room under the roof also tells us something important about rank. The top of the house was close to the family's bedrooms, but far from the family's status. It was close in distance, but not close in equality. A maid could sleep only a floor or two above a room filled with silk, carved wood, and expensive carpets, but her own room might be bare, hot in summer, cold in winter, and easy to forget. This is one of the most important lessons of these mansions. Being inside a grand house did not mean sharing its comfort. Now go to the basement. If the attic shows where some servants slept, the basement shows what made the mansion function. This was where the beautiful house became a working machine. There might be kitchens, pantries, coal rooms, laundry rooms, wine cellars, ice rooms, boilers, storage rooms, and servants' halls. Upstairs, dinner looked elegant. Downstairs, it was heat, smoke, noise, timing, washing, carrying, polishing, and pressure. A guest saw a plate arrive at the table. They did not see the kitchen that made it, the pantry it passed through, the servants who carried it, or the people who cleaned everything afterward. The basement had its own world of smells and sounds. Coal dust, soap, boiling water, metal polish, hot food, damp stone, wet linen, shoes on hard floors, doors opening and closing, trays being lifted, dishes being stacked, a fire being fed, a kettle being moved. These were not the sounds of leisure. These were the sounds that allowed leisure to exist upstairs. In some grand homes, male servants slept closer to this lower world. That might include footmen, housemen, or workers connected to the doors, dining service, wine, silver, coal, and heavy work. The basement was not just downstairs, it was the engine room of wealth. Without it, the ballroom had no warmth, the dining room had no food, the bedrooms had no clean linen, and the family had no comfort. The most beautiful rooms depended on the least beautiful ones. One of the most interesting things about these houses is that many of the service rooms were more important than they looked. A visitor might walk past a pantry or a laundry room without thinking much about it, but these were the rooms that made the whole mansion possible. A pantry helped turn food into formal service. A laundry turned dirty fabric into clean sheets, napkins, towels, shirts, dresses, and tablecloths. A coal room fed the fireplaces and heating systems. A linen closet held the soft, clean materials that made the house feel orderly. The fancy rooms upstairs were the show. The service rooms were the backstage. A formal dinner shows this perfectly. Upstairs, the dinner might look graceful. People sit at a long table. The plates arrive in order. The glasses shine. The silver is clean. The food seems to appear at the right moment. But downstairs, the same dinner is a race. Food must be timed. Dishes must be carried. Plates must be warmed. Mistakes must be hidden. Spills must be fixed. Servants must know when to enter, where to stand, when to clear, and how to move without drawing attention. The whole point was to make a difficult operation look easy. One of the most important spaces in this hidden house was the butler's pantry. It stood between the kitchen and the dining room, between the servants and the family, between work and performance. Silver could be stored there, china could be arranged there, food could pass through there before entering the dining room. In some houses, bells or annunciator boards showed which room was calling. The butler's pantry was almost like a control room. It helped the staff know where to go, what to bring, and how to keep the house looking calm. The butler was not just a man who opened doors. In a large household, he was one of the most powerful workers in the building. He controlled the dining room service, the pantry, the silver, the wine, and often the male servants. He had to know the rules of formal dining, the family's habits, the order of rooms, and the value of expensive household objects. If something went wrong at dinner, the butler had to fix it without making the problem visible. His job was to protect the image of the house. The housekeeper had a similar kind of power on the female side of the household. She managed cleaning, linen, storerooms, maids, bedrooms, and much of the daily order of the house. She might carry keys to important cupboards and storage rooms. She had to know what was missing, what was dirty, what needed repair, what room had to be prepared, and which servant was responsible for which task. A good housekeeper could make a huge mansion feel calm because she kept hundreds of small problems from reaching the family. Because the butler and housekeeper had more authority, they often had better rooms than lower servants. Their rooms might be more private or better furnished, but they were still servants. They could hold the keys to the house and still not own a single room in it. They could know every hallway, every cupboard, every routine, and every family habit, yet remain socially below the people they served. That is one of the strangest parts of mansion life. Some servants knew the house more deeply than the owners did, but the house was never truly theirs. A lady's maid or valet had an even stranger position. These servants worked very close to individual family members. A lady's maid might help with dressing, hair, clothing, packing, travel, and private routines. A valet might care for a gentleman's clothes, shaving items, luggage, and personal schedule. They could know secrets, illnesses, moods, habits, and personal details that guests would never see. Yet this closeness did not make them equal. It made them useful. The servant might know the private life of the rich person, but still return to a small room somewhere else. Large homes also needed a place where servants ate. This was usually called the servants' hall or staff dining room. It was not the grand dining room with polished silver and formal guests. It was the table for the people who cooked, carried, cleaned, opened doors, washed linen, and answered bells. The servants' hall was a second household inside the first. People talked there, rested there, learned rules there, and formed friendships there. But even among servants, rank mattered. The butler, cook, housekeeper, maids, footmen, kitchen workers, and younger servants did not all have the same status. The house had a hierarchy upstairs and another hierarchy downstairs. This second household could be lively. Servants were not just silent shadows moving through the house. They were people with opinions, jokes, worries, friendships, ambitions, and private hopes. A young maid might be saving money to leave service. A cook might be proud of her kitchen. A footman might be looking for a better position. A laundress might be exhausted before noon. A housekeeper might be strict because the whole system depended on discipline. Behind the calm front of the mansion, there was a working community with its own tensions and stories. For a young servant entering one of these houses, the building itself had to be learned. They had to know which staircase to use, which door not to open, how to enter a room, how to speak, when to appear, when to disappear, where to eat, where to sleep, and when they were allowed to rest. A mistake could be embarrassing, costly, or even led to dismissal. The house was not just a place, it was a rule book made of walls. This is why live-in service was so different from many other jobs. The worker did not leave at the end of the day. The workplace was also the bedroom. The employer's house was also the roof overhead. Even when the servant closed their door at night, they were still inside someone else's world. Their time, movement, meals, clothing, speech, and rest could all be shaped by household rules. To sleep in the mansion was not the same as living freely in it, but the story is older and darker than Gilded Age servants' rooms. Before many wealthy American families hired live-in servants, many early mansions and plantation houses were maintained by enslaved people. This must be kept separate from paid domestic service. A servant might be underpaid, overworked, watched, and controlled, but an enslaved person was not an employee. They were forced to work and denied freedom. In plantation houses and early elite estates, enslaved domestic workers might sleep in quarters near the main house, in service buildings, in cabins, or in rooms connected to the working parts of the property. The reason was often brutally simple: the household wanted labor nearby. These enslaved workers cooked, cleaned, carried water, tended fires, washed clothes, cared for children, served meals, and kept the house running. The mansion might look refined from the front, but behind it were people whose forced labor made that refinement possible. Their sleeping spaces tell a harder truth. They were close to comfort but did not share it. They were close to the family but not treated as family. They were close to the house but not free inside it. At some estates, the quarters stood behind or near the main house. That location matters. It meant the people doing the work were close enough to be called, watched, and used. But they were also placed away from the family's formal rooms and public image. From the front, the house might seem peaceful and noble. From the back, the story changed. You could see the workyards, kitchens, quarters, and service buildings that supported the beautiful front. This is one reason architecture can be so revealing. A house can tell the truth even when family stories try to soften it. The front of a grand plantation house might speak of taste, order, and status. But the quarters and work buildings speak of control, labor, and separation. They show that comfort was not only built with money, it was built with power over other people's time, bodies, and lives. So when we ask where servants slept, we have to be careful. In some houses, we are talking about paid servants. In others, we are talking about enslaved people. In later periods, we may be talking about Black domestic workers, immigrant workers, tenant workers, or estate employees living under unequal conditions. The details changed from place to place, but the larger question stayed the same. Where did the house place the people who made rich life possible? Not every worker slept inside the mansion itself. A grand estate was much larger than the main house. There might be a carriage house, stables, laundry building, greenhouse, gardener's cottage, gate lodge, dairy, workshop, or staff housing. The family's life depended on all of these places. Horses had to be cared for, clothes had to be washed, gardens had to be maintained, guests had to be driven, food had to be stored, repairs had to be made. The mansion was the face of the estate, but the working buildings were the body behind it. The carriage house is a good example. To the family, a carriage meant arrival, travel, elegance, and status. But behind that smooth arrival were horses, harnesses, wheels, mud, manure, repairs, feeding, grooming, and workers who knew the animals and equipment. A coachman or groom might live close to the stables because the horses required care before and after the family used them. The family saw the carriage appear at the door. The workers lived with the daily effort that made that moment possible. The laundry was another hidden world. Today, it is easy to forget how much work clothing and linen required before modern machines. A large household produced mountains of dirty fabric, sheets, towels, tablecloths, napkins, shirts, underclothes, uniforms, dresses, curtains, and more. Washing, boiling, drying, ironing, folding, and storing these items took time and strength. Clean linen was one of the signs of a well-run household, but it came from hard labor. A fresh tablecloth in the dining room began as heavy, wet cloth in the laundry. The kitchen yard also mattered. Many grand houses had work areas behind or beside the main building where supplies arrived, and dirty work could happen away from guests. Coal, food, ice, wood, laundry, ash, trash, and deliveries all had to move through the estate. The family's world was arranged to hide these movements. The service yard was where the house showed its practical needs. If the grand front door was the face of the mansion, the kitchen yard was its working mouth. This changes how we should look at old photographs of grand homes. The main house is usually centered in the image. It gets the attention. But the real question is, what is outside the frame? Where is the laundry? Where is the stable? Where is the servants' wing? Where is the kitchen yard? Where are the rooms where workers slept? A mansion photograph often shows the dream, not the system that supported it. Some of the most famous American mansions make this hidden system easier to understand. At Biltmore in North Carolina, the house looks like a grand European chateau dropped into the mountains. Visitors remember the banquet hall, the library, the staircase, and the huge rooms. But Biltmore also had kitchens, pantries, laundry areas, servant spaces, and back routes that helped the house operate. Its beauty depended on a large staff and a carefully organized service world. In Newport, Rhode Island, houses like the Breakers and the Elms show the same lesson. These mansions were built for families who wanted summer houses that felt like palaces. But behind the marble, gates, terraces, and ocean views were workers who cooked, cleaned, carried, washed, polished, opened doors, and kept everything running. At places like the Elms, modern tours of servant life are powerful because they take visitors away from the glamorous rooms and into the places where the staff actually moved. Suddenly, the mansion feels less like a dream and more like a workplace. Vanderbilt Mansion at Hyde Park also helps explain the layout. In houses like this, the service areas were carefully organized. The family and guests used the elegant center of the house. Servants used the routes that made the center work. Food, laundry, heat, and staff movement had to be planned. The mansion was not only a pile of expensive rooms, it was a system of movement, timing, storage, and control. For some workers, live-in service offered real benefits. It could mean wages, meals, shelter, and a place in a stable household. For a young person with few choices, a servant's room in a wealthy home might be safer than some other options, but the cost was control. The room came with rules. The food came with rules. The wages came with rules. The bed was inside the employer's world. A servant could save money but still have little time to themselves. A cook could hold power in the kitchen but still be socially below the family. A housekeeper could manage the keys but still sleep in a room assigned by someone else. That is why the servant's bedroom is so revealing. It was not only a sign of poverty, it was a sign of dependence. It showed that the worker's life had been pulled inside the household. The servant did not simply arrive, work, and go home. They ate there, slept there, waited there, followed rules there, and sometimes had very little privacy there. The bedroom was not separate from the job. It was part of the job. By the early 20th century, many wealthy families began complaining about what they called the servant problem. What they meant was that it was becoming harder to find people willing to live this way. Other jobs were available in shops, factories, hotels, offices, restaurants, and schools. These jobs could still be hard, but many had one powerful advantage. When the workday ended, the worker could leave. That simple fact changed everything. To live outside the employer's house meant more freedom. It meant your room was your own. It meant the bell beside someone else's bed could not reach you in the night. This shift made many grand houses harder to manage. A mansion designed for many live-in servants did not work as easily with fewer staff. Rooms had to be closed, formal dinners became less common, families relied more on day workers. New machines helped with some tasks, but they did not remove the need for labor. A vacuum cleaner still needed a person. A washing machine still needed someone to load, move, dry, fold, and store clothing. Technology changed the work, but it did not make the house run by itself. As live-in service declined, the servant rooms did not all disappear at once. Some became storage, some became offices, some became guest rooms, some were closed off, some were demolished, some survived only because no one bothered to renovate them, and some, much later, became museum exhibits. In many preserved mansions today, the grand rooms survived because they looked important. Ballrooms looked important, libraries looked important, dining rooms looked important, owner bedrooms looked important, but servant rooms were easier to ignore because they were plain. A narrow staircase, a laundry room, a coal cellar, or a small attic bedroom did not look grand. Yet those rooms explain how the grand rooms worked. This is why servant spaces matter. Without them, a mansion tells only half the truth. It shows the meal but not the kitchen. It shows the clean sheets but not the laundry. It shows the fireplace but not the coal. It shows the polished silver but not the hands that polished it. It shows the grand staircase but not the back stair. The hidden rooms prove that luxury was not magic. It was made by people. A good museum tour of a mansion changes the way you see the building. At first you may admire the ceiling, the staircase, or the view, but then you enter a servant hallway or stand in a small bedroom under the roof and the house becomes more human. You start asking different questions. Who carried the water? Who lit the fire? Who washed the sheets? Who heard the bell? Who walked these stairs when everyone else was asleep? Those questions make the house more interesting, not less. They do not ruin the beauty. They explain it. Now imagine the house again at night. The guest has pulled the bell. The servant has answered. The request is finished. The servant leaves the room and returns by the hidden route. Maybe they climb to a small attic bedroom. Maybe they go down toward the basement. Maybe they cross to a service wing. Maybe they walk back to a carriage house or a cottage on the estate. Wherever they sleep, the meaning is the same. Their room was placed where the house needed them. America's grandest homes are remembered for their beautiful rooms: the marble hall, the library, the ballroom, the dining room, the main staircase, the terrace, the owner's bedroom. But the truth of these houses is often found in the rooms that were not meant to impress anyone. The attic bedroom, the basement corridor, the servant stair, the pantry, the laundry, the coal room, the quarters behind the main house. These were the rooms that made the mansion possible. So where did the servants sleep? Not in one simple place. They slept in the hidden geography of wealth. Above the family, below the family, behind the kitchen, beside the stable, near the bells, near the work. Close enough to be summoned, but far enough to be forgotten. And once you see those rooms, the mansion changes. The grand staircase implies a back stair. The dining room implies a kitchen. The warm bedroom implies a colder one nearby. The clean linen implies tired hands. The silence of the mansion was not natural. It was created. The grand house was never just one house. It was two houses sharing the same walls. One house was built to be seen. The other was built to disappear. And somewhere inside that disappearing house, night after night, the people who kept the mansion alive closed their own doors and tried to sleep.